Coming up in episode 877, Dr. Deborah Penner.
It's the Livin, Vida, Low-Carb Show with Jimmy Moore. And now, here's Jimmy.
Hey! I haven't talked to you on the phone before, so I don't recognize your voice.
But you never listened to the podcast?
I was just making sure it wasn't somebody else, because I knew it was time for you to call.
But you never listened to the podcast?
Oh, yes, but you sound a little different
so
there.
You recognize my voice somewhat, I get. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. How are you today?
I'm spectacular, as always.
Me too.
Cool.
But I envy people who are spectacular always. Because I can't say that I mean...
There's something wrong with those people, for sure.
I've learned to be rather skeptical of them. Always.
Well, you know what? I think sometimes you fake it till you make it.
That's right.
And I think when you exude confidence and exude positivity, that rubs off on other people that maybe they won't be so grumpy.
I agree. In fact, I was just sitting here thinking how nutrition is so much in the same ballpark as politics and religion. And people tend to be so emotionally wound up and so volatile. And it's, we really have to be on guard to, really hold the center and stay positive, or you could just get swept up in this vortex of, basically fear-based anger and anxiety.
Yeah, welcome to my world.
Yes, and it's gotten more intense since, it's getting more intense for me.
Well, I think it's more intense
for you. You're the kind of the lead goose in this formation.
Well, and for anybody that I think preaches kind of a message, so to speak, that runs counter to traditional, conventional wisdom, you're going to get a few arrows thrown your way. But you know what? I see that as a badge of honor, not something to bemoan and be upset about. So I kind of take a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of people do about that. There's some people that can't handle being online and having all the negativity thrown at them. Oh, I hear you have dogs in the background.
Oh, yeah, I'm up on my farm. You'll probably hear chickens, too.
Oh, I want to hear the chicken.
At some point, but they've quieted down. They've done their morning song, and I think the neighbors are hiking past, so the dogs are talking.
Their morning song and dance. All right, well, let's just have a good conversation. We're already rolling tape, so I'll probably go ahead and air some of this. This was actually fun talking to you before we got on the air, but let's get on the air. And your name, Dr. Deborah Penner. She is a doctor of chiropractic. Got that from Western States University in Portland, Oregon. Opened her private practice in Chico, California in 1988, and you've always maintained a nutritional focus. That's one thing I love about chiropractors, Deborah, is you guys tend to be more on board with nutrition and not necessarily pushing a pill, because your training didn't allow you to push pills. That's pretty cool. And so now...
And not only that, the university I went to includes clinical nutrition in the curriculum.
Oh, really?
Chiropractic curriculum, yes, it does.
How much nutrition education does that include? How long?
Well, we had a full year
Wow.
of clinical nutrition.
Now, juxtapose that to 2 weeks that most medical doctors get in their entire training as a doctor.
So I hear.
Yeah. And that's it. They're lucky.
We had a full year, and it, and there was a lot of dialogue about nutrition also in many of the classes, physiology, pathology, so forth and so on. Nutrition was always kind of incorporated into the dialogue and the teaching.
And so you don't get you're just a chiropractor. I'm like, hey, if you want to be a chiropractor, you probably know more about nutrition than all the medical doctors that haven't educated themselves combined.
Very possibly. Not all chiropractic colleges teach nutrition to the extent that Western States University does.
Right.
But I think in general, the chiropractic profession in general has tended to be more alternative, more open-minded, and more holistic, just because of its roots.
Yeah.
My aunt, Marie, and her husband, JJ, were some of the first chiropractors in this country. They started practicing back in the 1920s.
Yeah.
In the prairies of Oklahoma. And they were the only doctor for miles around. They dealt with everything.
Wow.
And that is really the origin of chiropractic, and nutrition is included in our scope of practice.
How can
in
it
most
not?
states in this country, including California.
Wow. I mean, how can nutrition in any medical sense now, Deborah, how can it not be a part of the discussion? Now, I know doctors say, well, we haven't been trained on nutrition. The co-author on my book, Dr. Eric Westman, my last two books, Keto Clarity and Cholesterol Clarity, he had hardly any training in nutrition. He had to learn it because he had patients come into him and said, hey, I lost weight reading a diet book.
Right.
So, learning yourself and taking that bull by the horns. And, thankfully, people like you are learning nutrition in your alternative medicine types of classes, that if the mainstream medical profession isn't going to get it right, then others are going to have to step up. And I see people like you as ones kind of standing in the gaps that are out there in the nutritional education that people just haven't been getting.
Yes. I agree, and these are, frankly, these are very exciting times for me. I've been in practice for, 29 years this year, and I've evolved from, I grew up on a Mennonite farm, so I grew up on a whole food diet. Yeah. And in a very whole food environment. We raised most of our all of our own meat, vegetables, and fruit. Got our raw milk from the dairy around the corner, and we went into town once a week and or once a month, and bought a sack of organic wheat berries and watched it ground into flour in front of our eyes. And my mother made all of our own bread and baked goods. And by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I was a very sick child.
Wow.
And nobody could figure out why. And I didn't really figure out why until I was started in my 40s.
Wow.
I eliminated gluten. And I did that because I had a big house in town, and I would rent out rooms to usually young women or young men, but usually relatives of friends and family that needed to leave home but weren't quite ready to be on their own yet, so they'd go to live with their quote-unquote Aunt Debbie. And so I had one of these young women in my home for about a year and a half, and she was a celiac. And so because communal cooking and eating was a very big part of our household, I changed my kitchen to be gluten-free. Mm-hmm. And thinking that this would be inclusive of her and it would give me good experience learning how to cook, and I could better counsel my celiac patients. And lo and behold, I experienced dramatic improvements in my own health.
Wow.
Just by dropping gluten.
By accident.
I started recommending that to all my patients, and most of them got better.
When was this?
And then as I got deeper into the physiology, I started realizing, wait a minute, this isn't just gluten. This is grains and this is sugar.
Right. Debbie, what year was this that this epiphany happened?
This epiphany happened when I was, I think, 40, my very early 40s, 41, 42. I am.
And what year would that be?
59 this winter.
You'll be what?
59.
59. Wow, I'm looking at your picture on your website, and you do not look 59.
Everybody that sees me that hasn't seen me in a while says I look younger now than I did 10 years ago.
Wow. So I'm sorry.
I like that.
what year? Yeah, exactly. You should like that. What year was it? Like the late 90s? What were we talking about? I wasn't very good in math in high school.
It would have been like
mid 90s, maybe
18 years ago.
Yeah,
I'm terrible with spontaneous math.
That's all right. So like mid 90s is what we're talking about. So long before Wheat Belly, long before Grain Brain, and all the books that are real popular now that are kind of talking about this, you found this out for yourself quite by accident.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
And growing up in what you thought was pretty healthy. And for the most part, it sounds like it was a lot of nutrient-dense real foods. But you found that the gluten was a problem. So how did you start using that with patients? And by the way, we haven't given the name of your website. Chico Creek Wellness and Chiropractic is chicocreekwellness.com if you want to check out more and see that picture of her holding a rooster and some fresh vegetables. But I love that picture, by the way.
I also have another website, Jimmy. And
Okay.
and this is the website that I'm going to be converting and going with full time.
Okay.
And it's called wholefoodmedicine.com.
Ooh, I love that better, actually. Wholefoodmedicine.com.
I just happen to be in a little bit of a dispute with Whole Food Market right now, who is suing everybody who uses the word whole or food in their name.
That's like people trying to claim paleo.
I just don't think that they should own those words.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But I guess you do what you can. But I love this website.
See that. Hopefully that will be resolved soon, and hopefully I can continue to use the name of my business that I've had for quite a few years.
Yeah, I bet you trumped Whole Foods, the supermarket. You've been doing this since '88, you said?
Yes.
Yes. I think you have a little seniority on them on this one.
I have. I haven't necessarily been using that name all of that time, but I arrived at that name very honestly. I just started, when I met a mixer, I'm talking to people, they say, what do I do? And I say, well, I'm a chiropractor, but I am a whole food medicine specialist.
I love that.
That's what I do.
Shouldn't we all be whole food?
That's where my passion lies.
Yeah. Shouldn't we all be whole food advocates of some sort or another?
Yes.
So let's talk about, because in your search for answers to a lot of the metabolic issues that you were seeing happen, you came across ketogenic diets. How did you find out about keto?
All right. Well, I experimented with, because I was a sick child with terrible allergies and asthma, and it complexed into fibromyalgia and irritable bowel and chronic fatigue as an adult. I was always searching and looking. I'm a bit of a knowledge junkie. I read, I go to seminars. I've been looking for the answers, not only to my own health, but so I can help other people as well. And I had actually made a lot of progress in my own health, but in my early 50s, and then I hit menopause. Became menopausal at 54, and frankly, all hell broke loose.
Usually does.
And I got very sick, and I just couldn't figure out what was wrong. I couldn't eat anything, not even water. I couldn't eat anything. I was down to skeletal weight. I couldn't sleep. And then the final straw was my right arm. I woke up one morning and my right arm was virtually paralyzed. I could barely hold a coffee cup. And I thought at first I must have had a stroke. But then I realized, no, it hurts too much.
Yeah.
And I know a truck didn't run over my arm. So I got it, massage and whatnot. I got it going, and that arm just ached me like a toothache for months. And I realized and I went to see all the practitioners here in town, and nobody, really, they kind of scratched their heads and really couldn't help me out. And I ended up down in the Bay Area with a doctor that worked me up and basically told me that I had gallbladder impaction.
Wow.
And put me on a program that I was very skeptical of. And I went home and started it because I had asked God for direction, and it had come, and I was not going to ignore that. And I was desperate. And I started that protocol on a Sunday night, and I had dramatic improvement in my symptom. When I woke up Tuesday morning, I had zero arm pain for the first time in months.
Wow.
It was completely gone. It never came back, and my health just gradually improved from there. And that was a program that led me into basically a month-long liver detox, a 21-day, really a 30-day purification program that I started teaching to patients. And everyone benefited. Everybody would lose weight if they needed to. Lots of symptoms went away. Very dramatic turnarounds. But as time went by, I noticed that there was a demographic in these groups of people that weren't getting across the finish line the way I wanted them to. They would lose weight, but they wouldn't lose enough weight. They might say, oh, my migraine headaches are better, but they're not gone. And I also noticed that there was a really high rate of recidivism among this group. A lot of people just tended to fall back into their old patterns and put the weight back on and not stay with healthy eating. But I also noticed that even people that stayed with the healthy whole food program I put them on many of them plateaued. They would just hit a wall.
Yeah.
They couldn't lose more weight. It seemed like their inflammatory levels kind of stayed stuck at too high of a level. And so I started experimenting, and I had tried all these different diets as I was, growing up. I worked with the Atkins diet, back in probably the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was aware of ketogenic adaptation. So I just, by virtue of common sense, I looked at these people. They're insulin resistant. I checked their blood sugars. They were high. And it became a no-brainer that we needed to pull back on the carbs. And if you pull back on carbs, you have to increase fats. And so that's what happened. I started reducing carbs, increasing fats, and I started seeing results.
Wow.
And so from there, I had a couple of patient advocates that were working with me. We worked together, and we started designing ketogenic adaptation pilot programs. And we took the people who had gone through the 21-day purification and put them into the first pilot program. And lo and behold, virtually every one of them broke through.
Wow.
And migraine headaches disappeared. Stubborn weight started dropping away. Even an insulin-dependent diabetic attained normal blood sugar without any medication.
Yep.
And it was just such an incredibly beautiful and exciting thing. And the really wonderful thing about it is that none of these people felt deprived. They all feel like they're eating like royalty. One of them even went on an 18-day vacation with a group of friends across the country, stayed in ketosis the whole time and lost weight.
Wow. And
had a wonderful time.
That's cool.
And that's beautiful, because one of the biggest reasons people drop out of nutritional programs is that sense of deprivation.
Right.
And it just doesn't happen with ketogenic adaptation.
And a lot of people, when they go on vacation, Debbie, they like to say, I'll just let myself go and I'll get back on it when I get home, and yet they rarely do.
Well, that's true. And you have to, I believe education is really the core of that, really
right.
Understanding how this metabolic pathway works, how to activate it,
mm-hmm.
and all of the ancillary benefits. It's not just weight loss. This is
right.
about energy. It's about cardiovascular health. It's about mental health.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because if there's one question I've gotten since I released Keto Clarity over and over and over again is people say, well, I have 2.1 on the blood ketone meter and I'm eating really clean and low carb, moderate protein, high fat, but I've not lost a single pound. And then I start digging a little deeper and you find out, they're not sleeping well, or,
right.
they're overly stressed in their job right now. Guess what, people? Keto is not a miracle. It's not going to overcome those lifestyle issues. And I'm sure you see that all the time, Debbie, where your patients come in, they're saying, I'm doing everything right, but my lifestyle's gone berserk. Why can't I lose weight? Well, guess what? It's the lifestyle.
It is. And, it was funny. I had a lesson one day. It was like it all came to me in one day. Huge exclamation point dropped out of the sky.
Yeah.
and landed in my brain. But we were towards the end, the first ketogenic adaptation group that I and my patient advocate Tracy Feldhaus and I ran was started back in March, and we ran it for 3 months. And about the second month in, everybody was in full keto adaptation or ketosis, and and energized and happy. And and at noon that day, I had a meeting with Tracy, who is the insulin-dependent diabetic. Mm-hmm. And she said, I just don't understand it. My blood sugars have been great, and today they're off the charts. And I don't know why. I haven't changed anything about
right.
what I'm eating. And I said, well, something's changed.
Right.
The body doesn't do anything without a reason. So let's start with, yesterday morning, and let's just talk about your life. And so, well, yesterday was no big deal. Yesterday night was no big deal. She said, but, this morning my husband forgot to hook up the gas, and when I went to take a hot shower, it wasn't hot. And I got really mad. Aha.
Bingo.
So what happened, she got really angry. She had a little temper tantrum. Her blood sugar went up, and there you go.
Is it cortisol that's raising it?
Cortisol, adrenaline, cortisol, yes. Release of the glycogen from the liver.
Yep.
There goes the blood sugar, there goes the insulin, and away goes your glucose.
Which is why if you have a fight with your spouse, don't test your blood sugar after that or your ketones.
Well, don't test your ketones. It's pointless.
Exactly.
You might want to check your blood sugar to to really understand what you just did to yourself.
Oh,
now,
that's
later
a good
on
idea.
in the day, I got another phone call. It was about 5 o'clock, and it was from another one of my keto group. And she said, I'm not feeling well.
Yeah.
I feel weak, and I have a headache, and I feel slightly nauseous. And I said, well, what's happened? She says, I haven't changed a thing.
Yeah, right.
And I said, well, she says, and I'm concerned. I'm having a dinner party tonight.
Yeah.
And I said, are you worried about that? Are you stressed? She said, no, not at all. I'm looking forward to it. And I said, well, that doesn't sound like the trigger then, because stress can certainly, whack out your blood sugar.
Good stress.
And then there was this dead silence for a moment.
Yeah.
And then she said, I got very, very, very upset this morning. So upset I was shaking.
Yeah.
And her blood sugar went up that morning, and then she was bonking at 5 o'clock. So I told her to eat some whipped cream and berries, and she felt fine in 15 minutes. So
it was hypoglycemia for her.
It was hypoglycemia for her.
Wow.
And so that day was really the day that the lesson for me on the effects of stress and cortisol on blood sugar and ketosis really
monumental came
home. I got it. And we have in our I study a lot of natural hormonal balancing and therapy. And something we talk about a lot in those classes is that hormones are virtually stronger than anything.
Yeah.
Hormones are stronger than food.
More than calories, Dr. Penner? Really? More than calories? I'm just kidding.
More than calories.
But that's where the conversation tends to go in mainstream circles. They totally ignore the hormonal connection.
I know.
Which is
it's
horrific.
Huge. And I get women in my office that are on not only estrogen and progesterone, but also testosterone. The testosterone industry is really taking off, and frankly, I find that really scary because you feel fantastic for a while, and then things start to devolve in a pretty ugly way, and you see a lot of adrenal collapse and inflammatory problems taking off. And so these are people that, really need to detox their livers and get all the extra hormones out.
Today we have back with us yet again Katie Coleman. She's from a company called Keep It Real Food Company. Visit their website at keepitrealfoodcompany.com. But Katie, I love it that you put the focus on real ingredients, and that really is one of the major missions of your company.
Definitely, yeah. It's been important from day one for us to use ingredients that are real and all natural and easy to understand. There's so many products out there that are marketed as low carb or diabetes friendly or low glycemic that contain so many chemical sweeteners, processed ingredients, or even refined grains still. Yeah. And half of them aren't even really low carb. And I set out to create products that were better, that were easy to understand, and I just knew there was a better way.
Well, and there's authenticity in doing it the way you're doing. So thank you for what you're doing. And again, people can check them out. Go to keepitrealfoodcompany.com. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because you said you have this detox program that leads into ketogenic adaptation that seems to pave the way, trouble-free metabolic changes. And I'm assuming you're referring to kind of making some of these hormonal changes take place. Can you kind of get into a little bit about what you do with patients?
Yes. The purification program, and I do various ones. The Cadillac program is a 4-week program. I give a lecture once a week. This will probably be turning into a webinar soon, so it'll be available on the internet.
Okay.
But I'm doing it locally. I do groups. I also do individuals. And I can do individuals from anywhere as long as we speak English. That's my language.
Yeah.
And it's a combination. We have you drinking shakes every day that are providing basic foundational nutrition, along with liver pushers, things that are helping the liver to detox. You're eating generally raw vegetables the first week, and this is not ketogenic for the first couple of weeks.
Right.
It's cleansing. And you're taking herbal formula that is basically a combination of liver pushers, cholagogues, and liver protectors like milk thistle, for example, silymarin. Things to calm and clean the liver and gallbladder and all of the organs of elimination, which include the kidneys, the lungs, the skin, and the lymphs.
Yeah.
And I give a lecture or I meet with people once a week during this process. So it's a tremendous learning process, and we solve their challenges as they come up. If they're feeling tired or headachy or constipated, we deal with that through food or through whole food medicines and herbals. And what I'm starting to do now is weave the threads of ketogenic adaptation into the front end of that. So I'm getting people transitioned and incorporating some extra fats right into the front end so that they don't get so hungry.
Right.
Because that's been the problem that I've had in years past.
That's a biggie.
People have a real tough time that first week or two.
Cravings bad.
With cravings and weakness and low energy, and by incorporating some ketogenic concepts from up front, that is really minimized.
Is it coconut oil? What are you using?
Coconut oil would be the first choice. Of course, always some olive oil, but coconut oil, and I'm using some MCT oil. I'm a bit conservative with that. It's a bit much for some people. You have to start very slowly.
Yeah, now you tell me.
Yeah. But there are so many lovely oils, walnut oil, hemp oil.
Macadamia nut oil is my favorite.
Nut oil.
Oh, I love that stuff.
Lovely oils. And so incorporating more of these healthy oils up front so that, people are not getting so tired and bonky those first couple of weeks.
Bonky.
And then as the cleanse goes on, I slowly increase the fats, and from there, at the end of the 3 weeks or 4 weeks that we've been doing the detox, then I can be fairly sure, or at least I can assess where somebody's biliary clearance is.
Yeah.
If they're handling the fats, great. Then we can move on into ketogenic adaptation. If they're not, then we might need to hold at a moderate fat level and do a little more biliary clearance.
How do you know if they are or they aren't?
Well, if they're not tolerating fats, they're not.
Is it they're going to the bathroom and having loose stools? What is the sign?
A lot of times, what's happening is they're having indigestion. They're having queasiness.
Okay.
You get queasiness, or not usually full vomiting, but queasiness, just feeling a little unsettled, like you're on a little boat in high seas. You might get loose stool or get very constipated. Either one of those,
right.
I view as a sign of biliary compromise.
Yeah.
Those are the main things that I would look at there. I also, touch people. And, if I touch their liver gallbladder and it's tender, then I know that there's still a lot of inflammation there.
Ooh, yeah.
And we probably need to work in that area a little bit more before we start really working it out. Because, like I say, a high-fat diet is like putting your gallbladder on push-ups.
Well, and speaking of gallbladder, what about those people who don't have a gallbladder? They've had it removed. How do you counsel them in incorporating a higher fat? Is it possible?
Absolutely possible.
Okay.
It just I generally move a little slower with them,
Right.
because they don't have the reservoir to store bile. Their liver is having to work, I think, a little harder, a little more consistently. So we start slower, and we add bile salts with each meal, which, in my opinion, everybody without a gallbladder should do anyway.
Are they available over the counter, or how do you get bile salts?
I carry them in my office by prescription.
Oh, okay.
And,
So it is
but
a
I'm
prescript.
happy to, if people are interested in this, you can call my office. We can do a brief consult, and I will drop ship them to you.
Cool.
Along with, and sometimes there are other things you need. A very common problem I see, especially in stressed people and in the older population, is a decrease in stomach secretions, including hydrochloric acid.
Yeah.
And when you aren't digesting your food at the top end, and it's dumping into your small intestine in too large of particles, you're going to experience bloating and dysbiosis, which means the wrong bugs are going to be growing there. You're going to tend to get a yeast overgrowth. This will set you up for, bloating, irritable bowel syndrome. Reflux syndrome is another thing I just see so much is GERD.
Yeah.
Acid reflux.
And interestingly, one of the health benefits of a ketogenic diet is GERD and heartburn go away.
They sure do, usually within 1 or 2 weeks.
Amazing.
Yes.
So speaking of gut health, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the criticisms that we've heard out there of people going on a ketogenic or a very low-carb diet is, how do you feed the gut flora so that you make them happy? Because if they ain't happy, your body ain't happy. What's your response to that? Is it possible?
Absolutely. Again, anytime you change a diet, the gut is going to have to do some adjusting. And that's true with ketogenesis as well. But you should be eating leafy greens, and there's plenty of fiber in leafy greens.
Right.
And let's not forget that one of the main things that drives bowel function is bile flow. So that takes us back to liver gallbladder function again, right? Getting that liver gallbladder healthy and happy, so you have plenty of bile flow. I really encourage people to include bitter greens, bitters of all kinds, bitter greens and bitter. You can make tinctures out of things like yellow dock, anything, these bitters increase gastric and biliary secretions. So I encourage people to add bitters. Even if it's just a little pinch. In our culture, we have not celebrated bitters, and our palates are are not bitter friendly.
Can you explain what that is? Because you're speaking another language that maybe a lot of people haven't heard before. What a bitter is? Are we talking about a vegetable? What is that? An herb? Yes. What are we talking about?
Most bitters are plants. Okay. And there are vegetables that are bitters. This would be like your mustards, collards.
Gotcha.
Arugula. If you taste it and it's bitter or really
then
strong and pungent, you got it. And but yeah, those would be your green bitters. Another group that's very important to liver biliary function is the cruciferous, which is all your cabbage, broccoli,
sauerkraut.
That whole family. And so just eating those things fresh in your diet on a very regular basis, even if it's a small amount, really helps the gut. Then you also have your lacto-fermented probiotics. These are things like your raw sauerkraut, kimchi, beet kvass, and I teach making these in my classes. I encourage people to make them themselves. It's about as easy as falling off a log. And it's fun and cheap. Or you can go to the health food store and buy them. They're in the refrigerator. All lacto-fermented products are in the refrigerator.
They should be anyway.
They have been pasteurized, which means they're dead.
Right.
So don't buy it at Safeway. Oh, shouldn't have said that.
or any major
or any major food store. They need to be in the refrigerator, and it needs to say raw. And I encourage people to have 1 to 3 tablespoons a day.
Yeah.
You don't cook these products, by the way. You put them on. You eat them cold or maybe
Right.
the best warm them up a little
Because
bit.
you'll kill the bugs.
Yeah. So you build your flora, and it has a remarkable effect on moving the bowel and keeping the bowel healthy.
Oh, yeah.
And then another thing, of course, is prebiotics, making sure that the microbes that live in your gut have the food and the housing that they need.
Right.
And you can do that. There are various herbal formulas, herbs and vegetables that provide those types of carbohydrates, long chain carbohydrates, and so forth that really help build the gut. I have to admit, I use a powder that we add to our. You just add it to a shake or to water, and you drink it. Makes it real easy. But there are also foods that do that. Mm-hmm. And if you're eating, healthy, greens and a small amounts of a variety of vegetables, you're probably getting that.
Right. One of the things that I loved about your philosophy, and I'm just going to read it directly, your goal is to empower your students to be in the driver's seat of their metabolism instead of the back seat, letting cravings and bad information be the driver. And isn't that just a description of what's happening right now? So many people are taking a back seat, and one thing that I like to say is that people have abdicated their role in their own health to that man or woman in the white coat, and they've not taken back control of their own health. And it sounds to me like you're one of those medical practitioners that's trying to empower those patients to take back control of their own health, to be in the driver's seat again so they can heal their body and live optimally for a very long time.
Yes, I am, Demi. More than anything, I am a teacher.
Yeah.
I suppose we both are. Right now, at this point in time, I feel a bit like a preacher as well.
Can I get a hallelujah?
Amen. But yes, teaching people how this works, because this is our ancestral blueprint.
Right.
We are supposed to be able to shift from ketogenesis to glucogenesis.
Right.
And, in the summertime when the berry was on the vine and the crabapple was on the tree and the shoots were in the field, we would, gorge on, relatively speaking, on carbohydrates and put some weight on for the winter because we were going to need it. And I feel that we have lost touch with our knowledge of the fat-burning pathway.
Right.
We have been enculturated with a fat phobia that has been one of the worst things to ever happen to our species.
Right.
And we need information. People need to understand how this aspect of their physiology works, how to turn it on and activate it. Because this has been like an arm tied behind our back. And most people swim with one arm.
Or no arm.
Or sugar-burning arm. And so in ketogenic adaptation, in the classes that I do, we slowly take and put, the sugar-burning arm, we take and put it down, and we get that fat-burning arm activated and strong and strengthened. And then, of course, you have to keep it there. You have to build it for a while.
Right.
And you have to get that arm really strong and functional. I relate it to building a bed of coals. Burning sugar is like burning paper, and burning fat is like burning oak logs. But you can't just throw an oak log into a fireplace and throw in a match after it and expect it to take off and stay burning. You have to build a bed of coals, and that's really the process
of
ketogenic adaptation. And you do arrive also at a destination, which is ketogenic adaptation, but then you can decide what you want to do with that. And, the further you're into insulin resistance and diabetes, the less latitude you're going to have. But if you have a pretty healthy metabolism, you're going to be able to start switch hitting and, do the carb cycling like you talk about in your book. Right.
Exactly.
And you don't have to, constantly be eating, every single day 100%, high fat diet. You can have some carbs. It's very variable to the person, and you can decide how you want to run your life and your metabolism. But you have the information and the power to do it.
Well, and the great thing is once you become keto adapted, fat adapted, it's very easy to vacillate in and out of ketosis and still maintain most of the benefits throughout.
Yes, it is.
But too many people are walking around, Debbie, with sugar metabolism, and they wonder why they feel so run down all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sugar drives inflammation.
Among a lot of things.
Inflammation is another one of those topics. We could talk about it a long time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we have to have an inflammatory response. It's how we heal. It's
Right.
how we mount an immune response. We can't live without it. But if it's too elevated, it becomes the common denominator of virtually every chronic disease known to man.
Right.
And so keeping your inflammation level in bounds is it's kind of the bullseye, you know, in the health target.
Oh, yeah. We hammered that one pretty hard in cholesterol clarity because everybody obsesses about cholesterol, but if they knew their HSCRP, for example, the main inflammatory marker in the body, if they knew their level of that, they would know a whole lot more about their state of health than they ever will from their total cholesterol number.
Yes. Yes, and cholesterol is such a critical component,
right,
in every aspect of the health.
I've heard that somewhere.
You wrote the book. But yeah, people have no idea. There's still a tremendous amount of cholesterol phobia out there.
Oh, yeah.
And people trying to get their cholesterol under 100, which in my opinion, is pathological and the formula for big trouble.
Yeah, I was just seeing a study that just came out today. It was very interesting because I don't think they meant to make this point, but they said people with diabetes, even with normal levels of cholesterol, either naturally or through the use of a statin drug, actually had a 6 times greater chance of having a cardiovascular event happen, a heart attack, stroke, cardiovascular disease, even with the normal cholesterol. And I'm going, how is that so? If cholesterol is the culprit in heart disease and they have normal levels, how are they having 6 times more? I wonder if it's the blood sugar dysregulation and inflammation that Dr. Penner was just talking about.
Yes. One doesn't really have to look very far into the literature, the research, to start seeing the giant holes in the cholesterol cardiovascular disease hypothesis.
Well, and the fat clogs your arteries, fat makes you fat, you know, all these kind of images and memes that we've heard out in the mainstream health for so long. I think the gig is up and people realize there's a better way. You know, maybe, just maybe here in a few years, you know, the stuff that we're talking about today will become the norm. Do you see that happening sometime in our lifetime?
I would hope so. I'm very encouraged. The study that the New York Times just printed here a couple of weeks ago. I'm so thrilled. And then, you know, Sacramento Bee here reprinted it last week.
Right.
I sent a copy of it to my local radio station, but I don't know that if they're doing anything with it.
You know, that
maybe I'll send them a copy of this podcast.
That got a lot of play, though, nationally, and it wasn't a perfect study, so, you know, we'll be straight up about that. But the media impact of that study was so amazing because you saw positive coverage for low-carb diets, perhaps for the first time in many years, that it made this guy that had a low-carb book out there really happy that people were, you know, able to see, you know, good message, and then they go to learn more and hopefully come across Keto Clarity and some of the other good books that are out there that are talking about this. So,
yeah, we have to start someplace.
That's right. Get people at least interested first.
And anytime you have found when you find a perfect study, Jimmy, I'd like to hear about it.
Well, I think the Nutrition Science Initiative, Dr. Peter Attia and Gary Taubes, you know, what they're trying to do with NUSI is a big part of that. And not that those studies will necessarily be perfect, because they are sending them to third-party people, but I think they're going to get the ball rolling to at least prove the concept of a lot of these things that we wish we had, you know, stronger science for, that unfortunately up to this point has been, you know, widely ignored.
Yes. And, you know, speaking of Gary Taubes, I just want to, you know, take my hat off to that man for writing Good Calories, Bad Calories.
Speaking of taking a lot of arrows.
I know.
That man
I know.
sure did.
And, but I really appreciate him, doing the work and taking the heat, because he's just really done a good job. And frankly, it was that book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, that I read when it came out that really helped me define my clinical direction.
Yeah.
It really gave me the confidence to move forward.
I have interviewed so many people on this here podcast who said my foray into this message was Gary Taubes. And so, yeah, you're right. He deserves to be honored and appreciated for the sacrifices. He kind of defended Atkins when defending Atkins wasn't cool.
Right.
And so good for him, and good for you doing the great work that you're doing. Again, her name, Dr. Deborah Penner, and be sure to check out her website if Whole Foods doesn't make her take it down, wholefoodmedicine.com. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for being here today on the Livin' La Vida.